A Russian man, let's call him Alexei, is about to commit a crime. He's part of a gang that deals in illegal products. He walks down a dark alleyway late at night to meet another guy who he's been told is called Vasily. The two communicated on the phone just the other day, with Vasily telling Alexei that his clients are desperate for a fix since that last big bust. Alexei told him not to worry. A big shipment has just come in and there's enough for everybody. We're gonna make a lot of money, said Alexei. So what exactly does Alexei have to sell? And what is Vasily so desperate to buy? Heroin? Cocaine? Methamphetamine? MDMA? The answer is none of those things. The answer is cheese. And on this occasion, cheddar cheese, that most wonderful food that originates in the country of England. These two criminals are well aware that they could do some serious time for cheese dealing. So now let's have a look at why, as well as other insane things you won't believe are illegal in Russia. Number 10. Imported food products. In 2015, you might have read a story in the media about an organized Russian crime gang that was arrested for importing over $20 million of illegal cheese. Okay, you're thinking, you've heard that cheese might be slightly addictive, but come on, Russia, really? Is cheese really that bad? Is it tearing at the fabric of society? Are there infomercials in Russia being shown with eggs being fried along with the words, "This is your brain on cheese"? Well, the Russian government is indeed telling its citizens to just say no to cheese, but not because cheese is inherently bad for people. The reason is Russia's ban on imported food products that started in 2014. This was called a retaliatory food import ban because Russia was retaliating for sanctions being placed on it. The problem was, while this led to cheese production inside Russia increasing, people still wanted their delicious fix from other cheese-making countries. People wanted real Italian mozzarella on their pizza, with some Russians saying the homemade version of pizza didn't quite meet their expectations. Italian restaurant owners were up in arms about it. This didn't mean that local folks were looking at doing hard time for putting illegal French camembert on their toast, but criminals have been imprisoned for illegally importing various banned food products. Right after the ban, there was a hotline people could call if they thought an illegal food dealer was working in their area. If someone got a whiff of European cheese in their hood, they could inform the authorities and the cheese seller could go to prison. Those who were part of the cheese ring we mentioned were reported to be looking at serving 10 years behind bars. It was serious business, with one resource saying Russians were buying cheese the same way people bought weed in 1980s Brooklyn. Corner stores have become black market cheese dealers. It wasn't only cheese, of course. Illegal products could be meat, poultry, and fruits. Yeah, that means in Russia there's such a thing as contraband sausage. In fact, some Russians watched in disbelief as contraband foods were destroyed on live TV. What they beheld was the destruction of things such as Polish apples, Dutch cheese, and Danish pork. Even some ducklings were seized by the cops and then killed and incinerated. Some folks were pretty darn mad at the government, since millions of Russians live below the poverty line. Others shouted, "How can you do this? It's an act of fromagicide." But food is only the tip of the crazy iceberg. Number 9. Popular blogs. So you've been blogging for a while in Russia and you've started getting very many page views per day. Damn, you're almost internet famous, and you're mighty proud of that fact. But then one day you hear a knock at the door and it's the cops. They're not happy at all about your online celebrity status. The reason for that is if a blog in Russia starts getting more than 3,000 page views a day, by law it has to be registered with the country's mass media regulator, Roskomnadzor. This law was approved in 2014 and many Russians were not happy about it. The law also meant that bloggers cannot be anonymous and that the data must be kept on Russian servers. If you break any of these rules, you could find yourself in trouble. Critics called the move a crackdown on free expression in Russia, stating that Vladimir Putin was flexing his muscles, making sure that no one could start criticizing him online. In fact, Putin takes a dim view of the internet and has said before that it is a CIA project, which is tinfoil hat level of crazy right there. But maybe there's a good reason Putin hates the internet. Number 8. Memes. Have you ever seen a really funny meme containing an image of Vladimir Putin? Of course you have. They're everywhere. The memes that likely put Putin in a silent rage are the ones with the image of him riding a horse and not wearing anything on the upper half of his body. There's even one with him and US President Donald Trump on the back of a horse. Kinda funny, eh? But not so funny according to Roskomnadzor. It's said that making fun of people in a meme is illegal, with a law being passed a few years ago. In its own words, the agency said, "These ways of using images violate the laws governing personal data and harm the honor, dignity, and business of public figures." But surely surely the authorities wouldn't put a person in prison just for having a bit of fun. Tell that to Maria Motuznaya, a young Russian girl who back in 2018 was labeled an extremist for posting memes on the internet. Her memes were mostly about religion and not public figures per se, but that was enough for the Russian government to send the cops around to her house and take her away for interrogation. One of the memes consisted of a group of nuns about to light up cigarettes. The caption below was, "Quick, while God isn't looking." We thought that was kind of amusing, but the Russian government didn't giggle. Far from it. Maria ended up in court charged with hate speech and offending religious folks' feelings. She was looking at a possible 6 years in prison just because of a bunch of pretty harmless memes. When she got the knock on the door and realized she was being investigated for her allegedly criminal memes, she couldn't believe the authorities were being serious. She said to the Western media, "Honestly, the first time when I was shown the warrant, I laughed and asked, 'Are you serious?' I thought it was a joke of some kind. Maybe it's my friends playing a trick on me." As her case was going on, a 19-year-old guy was also under investigation for posting memes. One of his memes compared the Game of Thrones character Jon Snow to the almighty Jesus Christ. He was also called an undesirable citizen, and he was subsequently investigated. As for Maria, she got off in the end. The good news is that the Kremlin later decided to change the laws somewhat and not come down so hard on meme makers. Still, the laws are in place today, and that means you could get into trouble for posting a doctored picture of Putin riding a bear. Yeah, that meme exists. Just don't share it if you're Russian. If you think that's crazy, it's gonna get crazier. Number 7. WTF. Imagine a Russian version of Quentin Tarantino's Pulp Fiction playing in Moscow theaters. How much fun would that be? You'd hear the translation from the opening part of the movie when Samuel Jackson is interrogating the young men. "Say what one more time? I dare you. I double dare you." The next word would have been left out in the Russian version, as would a good part of the entire script. That's because in 2014, Vladimir Putin signed a law that banned all cursing in theater performances. Not only that, cursing is also not allowed in movies, TV, and the media. Get caught using bad language, and if you're a company, you could be fined up to $1,400. If it's just a person caught swearing, they could be fined $70. Imagine how much cash has to be put in the Russian government's swear jar. On top of that, if the content in any form, including books, has bad language in it, it must have a warning label on the jacket. It's said that the reason for the profanity law is to preserve the beauty of the Russian language, even though Russians curse all the time in real life. Especially Putin when he sees all the memes about him on the internet. Now let's continue to explore Russia's love-hate relationship with the internet with number 6. No drugs, please. We're Russian. There are illegal substances in Russia just like there are in other countries, but Russia has taken things a little further and banned websites that talk about drugs. The move was to prevent young folks from getting into drugs. But what if folks can't find the right information about such substances? Some drug websites, such as the US-based Arrowhead, aren't exactly anti or pro-drugs, but it can serve as a useful resource if you want to know more about a certain drug. But in Russia, this could be seen as promoting the use of drugs, and so such a website or blog would be banned. In 2015, Russian authorities blocked part of Reddit and thought about blocking the entire site because there was a thread going on about growing magic mushrooms. A Wikipedia page was also blocked for a while because it contained information about a certain type of Indian hashish. In fact, in 2019, Russia banned a grand total of 21,000 websites that contained information about illegal drugs. Meanwhile, that same year, Russia stood in 4th place for alcohol consumption. Booze is such a big problem in the country that some organizations have called it a national disaster. We should add, though, that Russia has been trying to crack down on boozing. Another ban now in place is drinking in parks and other public areas. Yeah, you could be arrested for bringing out a bottle of wine while picnicking with your lover. Some of Russia's bans, though, is something we could all get behind. Number 5. Jehovah's Witnesses. You can be sure of one thing in Russia, and that's the fact that you won't be getting a knock on the door, and when you open it, there are two smartly dressed folks who say, "We're here to talk about the only true God, Jehovah." The US-based Christian denomination has about 8.5 million members worldwide, and those that belong to the religion have been known to turn up at the door while you're watching TV. Not in Russia. In 2017, the country outlawed the religion. If you belong to it, you will be labeled an extremist. Some people are presently in prison for admitting that they are a Jehovah's Witness and trying to spread the word. What does Putin think about the religion? He called it complete nonsense. Putin is certainly not a-religious, he's just what you call Orthodox Christian. Or maybe he hates getting his TV watching interrupted by a knock on the door as much as the rest of us. Now we turn to the darker side of Russia. Number 4. Gay Pride. You won't see the rainbow flag flying on the streets of Russia this year or next year or for many decades to come, and that's because in 2012 Russia banned gay pride parades for a century. Yeah, you heard that right, 100 years. In fact, Russia has what's called a gay propaganda law. It's not illegal to be gay or lesbian or bisexual or transgender in Russia, but it is illegal to outwardly be proud about sexuality that Russia doesn't deem traditional. In a country that already has quite a large number of people who are prejudiced against sexual minorities, the 2013 law only served to create more antipathy. There are plenty of activists and reasonable people in Russia that have criticized the law, but their beliefs have often led to bullying and harassment. In fact, in January 2020, news reports told us that Russian activist named Yulia Tsvetkova was placed under house arrest by the authorities. What had she done? The answer is she had posted a drawing she had created on social media. The drawing had a same-sex couple with their 2 children. The text that accompanied the sketch said, "Family is where love is. Support LGBT+ families." For showing some love, she was charged with disseminating pornography, and she could spend 6 years in prison. In an interview, she said she had posted the drawing in support of a couple who had to flee Russia after they'd adopted 2 kids. In this respect, when we ask what regular things are banned in Russia, you could say one thing is human rights. Number 3. Don't forget your ID. When Russians reach the ripe old age of 14, they're told they must carry an internal passport with them at all times when outside the house. This ID is issued by the Ministry of Internal Affairs. If a person is found to be without this document, they could be held by the police. Okay, so you decide you want to see Russia for yourself and go there on a vacation? Whether you're doing some sightseeing in Moscow or are hiking in Siberia, you must have your passport on you at all times. Yeah, it doesn't matter where you are. If the cops stop you and you can't show them your passport, you could be fined. That's us giving you some sound advice. Now, let's get crazy again. Number 2. Driving. Okay, so driving isn't banned for everyone, but if you are transgender in Russia, you cannot get behind the wheel. You cannot ride a motorcycle either. What is this madness, you're probably thinking? Well, the law came in just a few years ago and was supposed to cut down on traffic accidents in the country. If you don't know already, Russia is renowned for its number of traffic accidents and fatalities. But what's that got to do with transgender people? The answer is that the government has stated that trans folks have a physical or mental disability. If you're a transvestite or kleptomaniac or fetishist, you're also barred from driving. Understandably, human rights activists have called this utterly ridiculous, but it's only slightly less crazy than the number 1 illegal thing in Russia. Number 1. Lacy underwear. In 2014, Russia introduced a law that banned the sale or production of lace underwear. The same law was also introduced in Kazakhstan and Belarus. But why, you might be thinking, and it's a good question. The answer is because Putin wanted women wearing homemade Russian underwear that was at least 6% cotton. Women in those 3 countries didn't much like the idea of being told what they could wear, and some of them said they didn't want to go back to the Soviet days when women wore what you might call boring panties. In fact, a group of women protested the law, with some of them wearing lacy underwear on their heads and shouting, "Freedom to panties." They were subsequently arrested and taken to the police station. One guy who commented on the law said that people would just go abroad and buy their underwear. He told the media, "I think this is just another silly law that shows the ineffectiveness of our government." He likely thinks the same about the cheese ban too. God forbid you get pulled over by the cops in Russia while wearing lacy underwear and carrying a Danish sausage in your pocket. Now you need to watch this video, Russian Sleep Experiment Explained, or have a look at this, why USSR had no serial killers.